from Topeka, Kansas. I'm Christy Baker-Lampe, an adjunct professor of applied piano at Washburn University, and the owner and primary teacher of KBL Piano Studio in North Topeka. Today, I'd like to acquaint you with one of my favorite composers of the 20th century, Norman Dello Joio. He was a prolific composer, and his music was very popular, especially during the mid-20th century. However, it's seldom played today in the United States and rarely played outside of this country. And I think that's a mistake. In terms of his piano works, I believe that the world is missing out on some great literature. My goal today with this talk is to raise awareness of and interest in Norman Dello Joio and his music. Dello Joio was born in New York City in 1913 to Italian immigrants. His first music teachers were his father, Casimiro Dello Joio, a third-generation church organist and choirmaster who taught him piano and organ, and his godfather, Pietro Leon, with whom he studied organ and music theory. He attended public school through the 8th grade and graduated from the parochial All Hallows Institute in 1930 at the age of 17. In 1925, at the mere age of 12, Dello Joio took his first full-time position as organist and choirmaster at Star of the Ocean Catholic Church on City Island in New York, following in the footsteps of his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather. 4 years later, he took the same position in the larger St. Anne's Catholic Parish in New York City, where he remained through 1934. Between his keyboard training and the 9 years he spent in service to the church, Dello Joio developed a deep knowledge and respect for sacred music, especially Gregorian chant, which he incorporated into many of his compositions. In addition to sacred music, young Norman was heavily influenced by the music coming out of New York's Tin Pan Alley, which launched the careers of Hoagy Carmichael, Jerome Kern, and Cole Porter, among others. Most notably, he was fascinated by the music of George Gershwin. Norman began playing in dance bands as a teenager while maintaining his position as a church organist and attending high school. He eventually formed his own dance band that played for numerous parties and events in and around New York. While Dello Joio never composed popular dance music or music for Broadway, many of the harmonic and rhythmic components of those genres found their way into his original works. Dello Joio accepted a scholarship and enrolled in the Institute of Musical Art, which later merged with the Juilliard Graduate School to become the Juilliard School of Music. He received his diploma in organ in 1936, but his fascination with how notes are put together had sparked prior to his Juilliard study. After taking the next year off to compose a few audition pieces, he reapplied to Juilliard and was accepted as a composition student, studying with Bernard Wagoner. He received his second undergraduate diploma from Juilliard in 1939 and his graduate diploma in composition in 1941. During the following summer, Dello Joio met Paul Hindemith, who took him on as a student, and for the next 2 years, he traveled once a week from New York City to New Haven, Connecticut, to study with Hindemith at Yale University. Dello Joio was employed part-time as a composition teacher at Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, New York, from 1945 until 1950. He then left his position and devoted the next 22 years strictly to composition, including scores for music and television shows. During this period, he became involved in promoting public school music education in New York and across the United States, working closely with the Music Educators National Conference and serving on several state and national committees which promote arts education. Dello Joio joined the faculty of the School of the Arts at Boston University in 1972. Shortly thereafter, he was promoted to Dean of the School of the Arts and he remained in that position until his retirement in 1978. He then moved back to New York, where he continued to compose until his death in July of 2008. Dello Joio was a prolific composer of band, orchestral, chamber, and choral music. He didn't write as much music for the piano, which is surprising given his keyboard background, and many of his earlier piano works were never published. However, there remains a fairly substantial body of available music for solo piano, piano four hands, two pianos, and a few works for piano and orchestra, all of which are worth investigating. The published piano works of Dello Joio fall roughly into two chronological periods. The first begins in 1940 with his Suite for Piano, which he didn't publish until 1945, and it runs until about 1952 and the writing of Aria, Toccata, and Toccata for two pianos, which was published in 1955. More than half of Dello Joio's piano output was written during these earlier years, including all three of his piano sonatas. The later piano works are fewer and farther between, beginning with the Fantasy and Variations for Piano and Orchestra, written in 1962 and published in 1963, and ending with the Introduction and Four Fantasies on a Chorale tune, written and published in 1986. His earlier published works are better suited to a more advanced pianist, largely due to their technical demands. However, Dello Joio's growing involvement with amateur musicians and music educators beginning in the 1960s led him to a period of creating music that was appropriately challenging yet accessible to a wider body of pianists. None of his piano works are accessible at the elementary level, but intermediate and early advanced students will find these later works interesting, motivating, and fun to play. Dello Joio was a master at building on European tradition with his use of recognizable forms, though he often altered sections upon repetition, adding, subtracting, or varying material. He was fond of theme and variations as a musical form and used it in several of his compositions. He frequently incorporated plain chant or chant-like melodic passages, but harmonized them with modern sounds such as major seventh chords, quartal harmonies, and other dissonances found in American jazz settings. He also exploited complex rhythmic patterns and syncopation, often making use of hemiola and other various polyrhythms. Dello Joio, throughout his career, resisted the urge to follow the experimental tendencies of the avant-garde composers in the middle and late 20th century, striving instead to produce music that could be enjoyed by the public at large. He was most often described as a true craftsman and as the people's composer. His biographer, Thomas A. Baumgartner, best summarizes the composer in the following quote: "He is people-oriented. He considers himself a working musician whose job it is to write pleasurable music that communicates immediately with the listener. While some consider this a weakness, others regard it as a strength. In a modern, diverse society that values freedom of artistic expression, there is bound to be diversity among those who express themselves through musical composition, and it is inevitable that the language of music will continue to change. Yet, as long as there is a listening public that appreciates a well-crafted musical composition with a strong melodic vein that is easily comprehensible, Dello Joio's music will have a place." The best way to understand Dello Joio's compositional style is to take a look at one of his representative pieces. Now, as previously mentioned, Dello Joio composed 3 piano sonatas, all in the 1940s. The first 2 were composed in 1943, along with several other important works. These pieces show a lot greater influence of his teachers from Juilliard and from Yale, which might be expected given that his studies with Hindemith ended in 1943. By 1947, Dello Joio was finding his own compositional voice, experimenting with layering of stylistic elements across the historical spectrum. So for this reason, I've selected as my example one of my favorite pieces, which was written during that year, the Sonata No. 3 for piano. Now, this piece is written in 4 movements, and it was published in 1948. It's not incredibly long, takes about 15 minutes to play, give or take a few seconds, but it's fun and it's very entertaining for the listener. Interestingly, there's no overlying tonal center. We can't describe this as the sonata in G major, for instance. Rather, each movement is written in a different key. The first movement, which will be our primary focus, is written in G major. The second is in D flat, or enharmonically C sharp. And it's loosely written in ternary form. In this very, very short movement, rhythm is as important as the melody. In fact, the entire melody is structured around a short syncopated 3-pitch motive. The third movement, which is slower and more reflective, is written in the key of A. While the meter changes frequently, the pulse remains very constant. One interesting feature of this movement is the subtle bass counter melody found just after the introductory measures. It almost presents itself as a quiet homage to Sergei Rachmaninoff. The B section is a series of patterns in extreme registers of the keyboard surrounding a simple range, a middle range melody that's shared between hands. After a short reprisal of the A section, the movement ends just as quietly as it began. The fourth movement, in the key of E, presents a lively, cheerful counterpart to the slower and somewhat melancholy third movement. It's highly syncopated and relies heavily on the intervals of second, third, and fourth for much of its melodic and accompanying material. The form could be described loosely as ternary, though Dello Joio deviates from the standard form through multiple transitions. In the B section, Dello Joio divides the accompaniment figure between hands while leaving the melody on the weak side of the right hand. I can honestly say that for the adventurous pianist, this movement is full of lovely surprises and challenges. So, Dello Joio has provided us with 4 movements in random keys. Or are they? Upon closer examination, a pattern begins to emerge. The first movement is in G. The second movement is in D flat or C sharp. The third in A, and the fourth in E. Rather than center on a single tonic, Dello Joio bases the tonality of this sonata on a dominant seventh chord, in this case, A7. This is one of the many unusual devices that he incorporates into his music. This sonata provides us with an excellent model of the composer's maturing style. Now, let's take a closer look at that first movement. Dello Joio, as we've established, drew much of his melodic material from his roots in the Catholic Church. Particularly, he loved Gregorian chant. So this first movement is based on a Gregorian chant, on the Kyrie from the Mass of the Angels. It goes something like this. To create his theme, Dello Joio first adds a set meter, in this case, common time. He then creates harmony by layering the voices one or two at a time in close polyphony. But he layers these voices in such a way as to build the chords found frequently in American jazz. Sevenths, dominant ninths, minor sevenths, etc. A quick word of caution to pianists and to piano teachers. Because of the parallel tenth intervals that are found in the left hand, this piece is better suited to a pianist with a fairly large reach and a lot of dexterity. Now the end product of all this layering sounds like this. Dello Joio was fond of theme and variations as a form, and he frequently used it, as we mentioned, sometimes more subtly than others. This time, he was definite, naming his first movement Tema con Grazione. In the first variation, he makes use of most of the keyboard, jumping from register to register almost like children playing leapfrog across the keys. The character of the variation is light and playful in contrast to the one that follows. The second variation in compound duple meter takes on a laid-back and bluesy vibe. The lazy mood is established by the introduction of a triplet ostinato in the treble, with a melody sneaking in underneath. This pattern continues throughout the movement. The third variation, in contrast, is marked martellato, meaning hammered. It consists of two melodies set up kind of like a Bach invention, each played in loud octaves counter to one another. Dello Joio once again is relying on polyphony, but this time he avoids the smooth, linear quality of the plain chant. In the fourth variation, Dello Joio creates a long, sweeping treble ostinato accompaniment, which is played over a deep bass line. The melody occurs in the middle register between the two accompanying voices. Now, keeping all three of these voices without breaking the legato line and without muddying the sound takes some pretty careful pedaling, but it's doable. The melody switches to the treble voice in the middle measures before returning to the alto register near the end. Interestingly, this variation modulates to the key of E flat from its original key of G. And it finishes there, leading to the somewhat totally ambiguous fifth variation. As we move into the final variation, the harmony becomes quartal to start. Dello Joio used quartal harmonies in several of his compositions, which may be due in part to the influence of Hindemith. The melody, high in the treble register, is far less recognizable in this variation than in any of the others, as it has been inverted and is presented in tiny phrases of 2 or 3 notes each. Just as an aside, this variation is written over 3 staves rather than 2, which makes for a bit of a reading challenge and balancing challenge. Dello Joio wrote over 3 staves in several of his piano works, notably the introduction of Four Fantasies on a Chorale Tune in 1986, and the Capriccio on the interval of a second, written in 1968, as a commissioned work for the quadrennial Van Cliburn International Piano Competition. That piece was published for the public in 1969. This variation is tonal, like the others. Its tonal center, however, remains somewhat ambiguous, traveling through keys kind of like the development section of a sonata allegro movement. Its rhythm remains steady, with the bass notes acting as a sort of metronome throughout much of the variation. The final phrase is open-ended, finishing on a half cadence of sorts and holding the final chord until it just fades away. Then, the movement ends with a short coda, which reprises the final phrase of the theme and returns the sonata back to its original key of G major. We've spent the last several minutes taking a short tour through the many prominent elements of Dello Joio's compositional style, through the first movement of Sonata No. 3. The best way to get the full picture, however, is to hear this movement in its entirety with these elements in context. So I'd like to end this presentation with a recorded performance of the first movement of the Dello Joio Piano Sonata No. 3 that I made recently at the SNC Performing Arts Center in Brownsville, Texas. But first I'd like to invite any questions, comments that you might have, and I'll leave my contact information on the final slide for the KBL address. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I hope you'll come to enjoy the music of Norman Dello Joio as much as I do. Now, let's have a listen.